No way!
A Lego set is a gift that always clicks. And clicks.
Mom, look! It's so beautiful!
And clicks. For every nature lover, choose a Lego set. A gift that always clicks.
This week on Let's Talk About Mental Health, I'm talking about family. How to manage your family relationships for better mental health. So let's get talking. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast about mental health and well-being, hosted by Jeremy Godwin. Let's talk about mental health, because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Let's Talk About Mental Health, the weekly podcast about improving your mental health and well-being. I'm Jeremy Godwin. Thank you very much for joining me. This week's episode is Let's Talk About Family. I'll be talking about how to establish healthy relationships with your family and how to manage dysfunctional relationships. So, let's talk. There's an old saying that goes, you can't choose your family. And let me say from personal experience that truer words have never been spoken. When it comes to family, both our immediate family and our extended family, everybody's experience is completely unique, and yours might be great. They might be just okay, or they might be downright challenging, or they might be a combination of all three. Regardless of your situation, working through how you relate to your family in order to establish healthy relationships, or to minimize the potential damage that can come from dysfunctional relationships, takes time and it takes work. And today, I'm going to talk about some ways that you can do just that. This is going to be the most personal episode that I've ever posted because I'm going to talk a bit about my relationship with my mother, which I've alluded to a few times, but which I don't usually talk about in detail for a number of reasons. The main one is probably fear of being judged, if I'm really honest. So, here goes. Let's get into this week's topic. Your family life can have a direct impact on your mental health and well-being, whether you care to admit it or not. Our family members are usually the people that we're closest to in the entire world, since we've known them all or most of our lives, depending on your situation. And with that comes pros and cons. Pros in that these are the people who know us the best, and cons in that these are the people who know us the best. And so sometimes people can potentially use that level of knowledge to cause us harm, whether consciously or subconsciously. Now, let me be very clear here and say that many of us are fortunate to have loving and supportive families, which is wonderful. However, there are also many of us who have really difficult relationships with certain family members, and it can become a challenge to keep those relationships running smoothly in order to protect our mental health and well-being. Negative family relationships can cause a lot of stress, and if you're struggling with your mental health, for example, dealing with depression or anxiety, then sometimes family interactions can be a major source of distress. Healthy family relationships are ones where there is love, support, kindness, mutual understanding, and, most importantly, clear boundaries that are respected. On the other hand, unhealthy family relationships will still quite likely involve love, but often that can be accompanied by judgment, manipulation, lack of support, cruel behavior, zero or minimal understanding, and either a lack of boundaries or boundaries that aren't respected. Often it's our closest relationships that have the greatest impact on our mental health and well-being, the ones that we have with our parents, our siblings, and even our children, for those of you with kids of your own. For me, the most difficult relationship that I've ever had is with my mother, and I no longer have any relationship with her other than sending a card at Christmas and a card for her birthday. It's a very long story, but the kind of short version is this. My parents split up when I was 7 and I was raised by my mother. My dad died when I was 23, but after he left, I barely ever saw him, so it was mostly just mum and I. Now, I'm an only child, and after dad left, mum became physically and emotionally abusive. The physical abuse was bad enough. She would hit me so hard that I'd wet myself sometimes, or she'd chase me around the house with a knife, to the point where I rarely ever felt safe at home. But it was the emotional abuse that did the most damage. I left home at 17 when I finished year 12 of high school, and even after I left, she enjoyed causing drama and creating arguments as much as possible. Now, I tried to love her in spite of everything, but it was really difficult. At first, I would call her a couple of times a week or go see her, and then it became less and less frequent until eventually I would go out of my way not to speak to her or to see her if I could help it, because usually it would just leave me feeling horrible. I even ended up moving to a different state at the age of 25 because subconsciously it was a way of getting as far away from her as I could. Anyway, one of my mother's regular habits was to create an argument with family members and then to announce that she wasn't speaking to anyone anymore and just stop answering the phone for weeks or months on end, usually in an attempt to drum up some attention. On New Year's Eve 2012-2013, so December 31st, 2012, I had a really good, really long conversation with her that night, and it was probably the nicest conversation that we'd had in years. And I told her that I'd call her the next day to wish her a Happy New Year, just something that we usually did. I called her the next afternoon and there was no answer. And I kept calling, and after a few days, I thought something was up, so I called her sister, my aunt, who lives 2 or 3 hours away. And she told me that my mother had announced yet again before the new year that she was cutting everyone off. Something to do with not being happy because we were making her go see a doctor for these major health issues that she was having, or still having. I was absolutely dumbfounded. She didn't say a single word to me on the phone when we spoke on New Year's Eve. And to be honest, it just felt like a slap in the face. Suddenly I was done. The manipulation, the drama, the ungrateful and spiteful and vindictive behaviour, enough was enough. And that was it. I haven't spoken to her since. Now, roughly 6 months later, one of my aunts gave in and went to see her because she still wouldn't answer the phone. And apparently my mother acted like nothing had happened and just started carrying on that she didn't understand why I wasn't calling her. And anyway, that still just makes me shake my head in disbelief. Here's the thing. People are who they are and you cannot change them. In any situation to do with another person, you only have 3 choices. Accept things as they are, or you can state what you need from the relationship and give them a chance to at least meet you in the middle, or let go. Now, I tried everything that I possibly could with my mother, and unfortunately, from my perspective, there's only so long that you can be in a situation that's bad for you. You can give people an opportunity to change and you can set boundaries, but if you keep on offering people chance after chance after chance and nothing changes, then eventually something needs to give, because nothing changes if nothing changes. Now, I am not saying that you should walk away from family relationships completely and that doing so will solve everything, because it won't. Just because I no longer have contact with my mother doesn't mean that I don't care, and it doesn't mean that I don't think about her frequently. Even if you do walk away from a relationship, any relationship, you'll still have a lot of crap to work through. Believe me, I know from personal experience. But you do always have that option, and if it's something that you feel that you need to do, then that is your choice, and nobody has the right to judge you for that. Your mental health and well-being needs to be the number one priority in your life, because you can't possibly hope to be there for other people in an effective manner if you're struggling to even put one foot in front of the other. I know it's a bit controversial, and I know that for many of you, your culture might focus strongly on the family unit as being the number one priority, which is fine and lovely when your family treats you with kindness and respect, but not so much when they consciously or subconsciously hurt you time and time again. And that's where focusing on establishing healthy relationships comes into play. So let's talk about that, and then we'll go on to some tips of what to do about dysfunctional relationships. 3 tips for establishing and maintaining healthy relationships with your family. The first is to choose whether or not to engage. Now, I talk about choice a lot, and as Dr. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. in our response lies our growth and our freedom. What that means is that in every single situation, you have a choice, and that choice is how you choose to respond. Whether you take things on board or not, whether you clap back when someone is saying something negative to you, whether you take on board other people's judgments or nastiness, all of that is on you. Now, I know firsthand how difficult that is if you're dealing with someone who, for example, deliberately goes out of their way to create drama. But you still have a choice, even if that choice is to recognize that your only option is to walk away. To quote Dr. Frankl again, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So your first choice in any situation is whether or not to engage. The next thing, and probably the most important for every relationship in your life, friends, romantic, family, is about setting boundaries. Now let's be clear. In real life, it's not like we all just sit down and say, here are my boundaries, unless that's something that feels right to you. But you set boundaries by being assertive about what you will and won't accept. I'm going to go into boundaries in a lot more detail in a future episode in a few weeks' time. But the short version is that boundaries are those rules and limits that you set for yourself and for your relationships with others. For example, if your sister insists on calling you at 6 o'clock every Wednesday night, but that's when you get home from work and you're always tired, then you have two choices. Option 1, you accept the situation as it is. Or option 2, you can seek to change it by asking for different behaviour in a firm but fair way. You could say, hey, I love it when we chat. However, I'm just not up for it when I get home from work. So how about we move our weekly calls to Saturday afternoon so I can be in a better frame of mind? So when we talk about boundaries, it basically means asking for what you need. Now, remember to take into account the other person's needs too. In that sister example, maybe she's calling at that time because it's one of the only times that she has to herself. So perhaps you'll need to negotiate and compromise. Setting boundaries is about asking for what you need and explaining why you need it, and then asking what the other person needs as well, and finding a solution that works for both. The third point that I encourage you to consider about having healthy relationships with family members is to manage your expectations. Like I said, people are who they are and you can't change them, so you need to really think about what you expect from people. I used to get so disheartened that neither of my parents ever turned up to awards nights or to see me perform in the High School Musical, which I did a pretty good job at, let me just say. But it is what it is. Back then, I used to get so upset about it all the time, but I just didn't have the emotional tools to accept that they were both people who put their own needs first. If I had have been able to process that and accept that back then, I would have been much more easily able to manage my expectations of them. It's the same when we want someone to accept us for who we are. Whether or not someone accepts you for who you are has absolutely nothing to do with you. That is 100% on them. Yes, rejection hurts, but it's not about you. That's completely about the other person. So, as disappointing as it can be sometimes, you need to manage your expectations. By all means, tell them how you feel and give them a chance to change, but if they don't come to the party, then you can't force it. It's that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Focus on what you need to focus on, which is your mental health and well-being, and manage your expectations. Okay, so if you've tried all the healthy relationship stuff, but you've still got some family stuff happening that makes the early episodes of The Simpsons look like the Waltons by comparison, now what do you do? Here are some ideas for managing dysfunctional relationships. First, start by resetting your boundaries again. Now, if your family is dysfunctional with a capital D, you're probably going to have to do this quite a few times to see if you can make it stick. Set very clear boundaries and do it in a calm and rational manner. But be firm and assertive and stick to it, because boundaries are completely useless unless you enforce them. Let's be really honest here. Resetting your boundaries will very possibly create arguments, and if it does, that's okay. Change isn't easy. It takes time and perseverance, but eventually, things will change if you stick to your boundaries. Take it one step at a time. Another big thing for managing dysfunctional relationships with your family is to choose to practice kindness and understanding, even if that's not what you're getting back in return. Now, this is something I touched on a little bit in episode 11, the holidays, but when we're interacting with family, often the emotions run really high, and that's where we can get into big conversations about big issues, such as talking about sensitive subjects like politics or religion. I'm going to say this really bluntly. If you know that you're prone to getting into arguments, then you need to come at things from a different angle. If you can, push yourself to be kind and understanding. I have a family member who voted for a right-wing party here in Australia and then told me about it after the election, and my head almost exploded. It affected our relationship for a really long time because I just couldn't bring myself to engage with this person. But in hindsight, I look at it very differently now. First of all, I know he's a good person. And the reasons for people's political beliefs or religious beliefs aren't always black or white. Secondly, we live in a world where there is a lot of fear, and fear manifests in many different ways. Now, whether or not that's why he voted for them is none of my business, but I can choose to be a bit more understanding and to ask questions rather than just saying, nope, sorry, we're done here, or just getting into an argument. I always have a choice. Which brings me to, make a choice not to discuss highly personal topics with family, especially those who you know are going to argue. Remember when the 3 things that we didn't talk about were politics, religion, and sex? I mean, I don't think that we should be sticking our heads in the sand, but we also have to accept that political beliefs, like religious beliefs, are really personal. And no amount of arguing is going to change the way someone thinks. Arguing serves no useful purpose because you will never reach consensus through heated conflict. If you can't accept the person as they are, at least respect their right to have their own point of view and ask them not to share it with you. If they don't respect that boundary, focus on something else or walk away if you have to. And remember that just because someone believes something that you disagree with, that doesn't make them a bad person. There is always more to any story than what is going on above the surface, so show some kindness and compassion. A lot of the more extreme political beliefs that are out there are happening because people are afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of losing the world that they know, afraid of all the horrible things that we human beings do to one another. That doesn't make them bad people. And we can't just cancel people because we don't agree with their opinions. Further to that, like I said earlier, you can choose not to engage. That may mean removing yourself from the situation, either physically or mentally. Now, by mentally, I mean that you may need to distract yourself so that you can just let whatever is going on or being said be background noise, like water off a duck's back. Or you may need to physically remove yourself. If it's a phone conversation, then make an excuse so that you can hang up the phone. Or if you're in person, then find a reason to leave. In the more extreme cases, it's always handy to be prepared with an escape plan so that you can extract yourself after a polite and reasonable amount of time. I mean, I know this sounds a little bit mean, but it is what it is. If you know that you're going to be with someone who is challenging to deal with, have an escape plan. If you can respond to them with kindness, if someone is being less than kind to you, it's a way for you to sow the seeds of change. And if someone realizes that they aren't going to get a rise out of you because you're choosing not to engage, they'll often try to push it even further with you, and then eventually they'll give up and find someone else to play with. So choose not to engage. Let's talk for a moment about feeling judged by a family member. If you ever feel like you're being judged for some aspect of your lifestyle, then, like I said before, know that that's not about you. That's about the other person. I know that's tough to hear and even tougher to accept, especially when it's someone that you're close to. But let's be blunt here. Happy people don't judge other people. It's not about you, so let that shit go. Like it says in The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, there is a huge amount of freedom that comes to you when you take nothing personally. And finally, you can decide what relationship you have, if any. I believe that as long as you are being fair and objective about it, then to hell with what anyone else might say. If you decide to see your family just once a year, or if you decide not to see certain family members at all, then that is your choice. I mean, don't be nasty about it. You don't have to get into some grand confrontation or cut people out of your life in an attention-seeking way, because that just creates negative energy and unnecessary drama. But be clear about what you need from your relationships. And if you're not getting it, then reassess your part in the relationships. Just because you are related to someone does not mean that you have to put up with shit. Many of us choose to spend more time with our chosen families, the friends who we're closest to, because we feel less judged and more supported, and that is always your choice. You'll notice that all of these points that I've covered today are focused on what you can do instead of the other person, and that's because, as I always say, you have no control over what another person does or doesn't do or say or think. This is what it all boils down to. Managing your family relationships in order to look after your mental health and well-being is 100% about what choices you make. You can ask someone to change. You can explain how what they do or say impacts on you. You can set and reset your boundaries with them 1,000 times over, but you have no control over what they do or don't do. Give people the opportunity to come to the party, but focus your energy on accepting what you can control versus what you can't control. It's when we let go of the delusion that we can control others that we start to find true peace, true happiness. A loving family is one that is kind and supportive. So, do what Madonna said, express yourself and don't go for second best. So that's it for our chat about family relationships and mental health. To wrap up this episode, here are a few points to consider. Number 1. Family relationships are important for support. However, they can be extremely challenging when you don't get along. Number 2. It's up to you to set clear boundaries and, most importantly, to stick to your boundaries. There is no shame in putting your mental health and well-being first in all things, because you need to make sure that you can function before you can think about taking care of other people. And number 3, make smart choices about the way that you interact with family members, especially those who you have trouble getting along with. Nobody can make you feel or react a certain way because your reaction is your choice. It takes time and it takes effort, but you can take control. As always, I'm going to close out with a quote that I'd like to encourage you to reflect on and consider what it means for you. This week's quote is another one from The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it is, "Nothing other people do is because of you. It is because of themselves." Let me repeat that. Nothing other people do is because of you. It is because of themselves. Alright, so to summarize. Family relationships can be fraught with difficulty because these are usually the people who know us best and who have the strongest ties with us. But that doesn't mean that anybody has the right to say or do things that impact negatively on your mental health and well-being. You have a choice in every relationship in your life. Engage or don't engage. Set clear boundaries, give people a chance to respect those boundaries, but don't put up with crap. If you have to change the nature of your relationships in order to protect your mental health, then do so. Just do it in a fair and kind way. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope that it gave you some useful, practical advice on the subject of family and mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell someone that you know about it, because word of mouth is a great way to help new people find the show. Next week's episode will be Purpose. I'll be talking about what purpose is, why it's a huge part of mental health and well-being, and how to find ways to bring a greater sense of purpose into your day-to-day life while still paying the bills. I hope that you'll join me for that episode, which will be released on Monday morning, Australian time. On Friday, I'll be sending out the next issue of the Mental Health Talk newsletter, which is a weekly roundup of articles and resources that are focused on good mental health and wellbeing. You can find the newsletter and past episodes of Let's Talk About Mental Health at the website, which is letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. That's letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. And you can also sign up there to have new posts delivered to your inbox. Find Let's Talk About Mental Health on social media. I post additional content daily on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at LTAMHofficial. That's LTAMHofficial. If you're looking for a coach, I offer coaching services to clients anywhere in the world via video conference. Have a look at the coaching section of the website at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. Have an absolutely fantastic week. Look after yourself and, as always, make a conscious effort to put kindness out into the world, because what you put out will come back to you. Take care and talk to you next time.